The backlash was still echoing when the second wave of controversy hit louder, sharper, and far more personal. Because now people weren't just speculating about Meghan's intentions. They were beginning to uncover the details of what this quasi-royal Australia trip actually involved. And those details made everything worse. At first, the trip seemed harmless. Meetings, appearances, a few charity engagements, maybe a panel or two. But once insiders began speaking out, the picture that emerged looked less like a casual visit and more like a tour, a royal-style tour with structure, protocol, and a planned media presence. Not official, not sanctioned, but undeniably designed. The first clue came from someone in event management. They described getting an inquiry not from Meghan herself, but from someone representing her. The message wasn't rude, it wasn't demanding, but it carried a specific tone, a tone suggesting hierarchy and importance. It used language normally reserved for diplomatic visits, not celebrity trips. Words like coordination, hosting arrangements, security considerations, and anticipated public interest. This wasn't a fan meetup, this wasn't a book signing, this wasn't a casual drop-in. It was something engineered. And that was precisely the problem. Because when Meghan and Harry stepped down from senior royal duties, they agreed very publicly not to represent the monarchy, not to act on behalf of the crown, not to perform royal tours, not to use their influence to imply association with royal authority. But this felt like an echo of their former life, a shadow of the royal world they left behind, a performance of royalty without the palace, a royal tour without the title. And Meghan wasn't just embracing it, she was orchestrating it. What made everything more inflated was the rumor that she would be greeted formally by certain communities, that there might be organized events, that her arrival could attract crowds like it did in 2018. And once that rumor got out, the internet erupted with one burning question. Did Meghan want to recreate her royal peak? Because Australia was the place where Meghan's global stardom exploded. Those days were electric. Crowds screaming her name, women cheering, children waving flags, cameras flashing as she spoke about female empowerment, compassion, kindness, modern motherhood. The world saw a duchess who was charismatic, warm, relatable. Some say Meghan never forgot those moments, and some believe the trip was an attempt to reclaim that image. But critics argued otherwise. They claimed she was trying to blur lines again, using royal memories to fuel her modern celebrity brand. They accused her of pretending she was on a diplomatic tour. They accused her of trying to overshadow the real royals, especially at a time when the monarchy was maintaining a deliberately calm, reserved tone. And then came the twist that fueled the backlash even more. Reports that the Australian government had no involvement in her visit, no coordination, no protocol arrangements, no official acknowledgement. This meant Meghan was planning a royal-style itinerary without the institution that gives it legitimacy, and that created chaos. It raised questions about security. Who would protect her? Would she hire private agents? Would she expect local police? Who would pay? It raised questions about crowds. If hundreds of people showed up, would she be prepared? Would she allow photographs? Would she engage like a duchess or distance herself like a celebrity? It raised questions about messaging. Was she visiting as Meghan Markle, individual, or Meghan, Duchess of Sussex, title holder but non-working royal? And that ambiguity created a vacuum, one that commentators and critics wasted no time filling. British commentators accused her of exploiting her title. Others went further, claiming she was rehearsing for a monarchy-free monarchy, a public life where she keeps the prestige of royalty but operates independently. A duchess without borders, a global royal without responsibility. Australian commentators had a different concern. Would Meghan's visit create tension for the government, for the monarchy, for the public? Should she be treated like a royal guest or a celebrity visitor? No one knew. And internally, according to palace watchers, the royal family noticed. They always notice when lines are crossed or blurred, but they didn't respond. Not publicly, not even subtly. Their silence was cold, heavy, and strategic. It was the same kind of silence they reserve for scandals they want to outlive without getting involved. But royal insiders began to speak anonymously, as they always do. One source said they were concerned that Meghan's actions could confuse the public about the monarchy's role. Another said they hoped she would be mindful of the impact. A third said simply, "This is not helpful." Those three words, "not helpful," were enough to reignite debate. While the world argued, Meghan remained completely silent. No statement, no explanation, no Instagram post suggesting a visit, no podcast hinting at travel, nothing. Her silence made the story bigger, because silence, from someone whose every move is analyzed, is rarely just silence, it's calculation. Supporters claimed the entire backlash was exaggerated, that Meghan was being unfairly targeted again, that she had every right to travel and meet people, that she didn't need anyone's permission. And they're right, she doesn't. But the public wasn't reacting to her rights. They were reacting to her presentation. Because this wasn't the Meghan of Montecito, the entrepreneur and mother. This was the Meghan who once walked beside a future king, curtsied to a queen, and carried the global aura of duchesshood. And when she shifts into that mode even a little, the world feels it. And then came the biggest shock, leaked notes describing the trip itinerary. They weren't official documents, they weren't signed, but they revealed exactly why the word quasi-royal was used. Because whoever drafted the itinerary didn't write it like a celebrity's schedule. They wrote it like a royal agenda. The language was filled with phrases like engagement, hosting committee, special visit, cultural reception, public greeting, accompanied arrival, community leaders, arranged introduction. These words sent royal watchers spiraling, because they were the vocabulary of royal tours, formal, structured, and symbolic. And they raised the most controversial question of all. Was Meghan rebranding herself as an independent duchess, leading her own global engagements? If she was, then Australia wasn't just a destination. It was a statement, a signal, a beginning. And that idea terrified some, thrilled others, and angered many. Critics said it was disrespectful. Supporters said it was empowering. Neutral observers said it was unprecedented. But everyone agreed on one thing: it was bold. The backlash grew worse when commentators compared Meghan's possible visit to the royal family's official protocol. When the Queen visited Australia, she was met by officials. When Prince William visited, there were formal events. When Prince Harry visited in 2018, crowds lined the streets. If Meghan appeared in public with even a fraction of that reception, crowds, cameras, cheers, it would instantly look like a royal tour. And that's precisely what critics feared: the visual erosion of royal legitimacy. If Meghan could generate royal energy without royal authority, what did that mean for the monarchy's power? What did that mean for perception, influence, public loyalty? Meghan's supporters turned this argument on its head. They claimed the monarchy was simply threatened, that Meghan's natural ability to attract crowds was a problem because she wasn't under palace control anymore. To them, the backlash wasn't about protocol. It was about fear of Meghan's potential as a global independent figure. And then came the final blow. Reports that Meghan's team had discussed media management for the trip. Not paparazzi control, not celebrity arrival planning, not casual PR. Media management, a term used for high-level visits, diplomatic events, and royal engagements. That confirmation alone convinced the public that the trip was bigger than they were told. That Meghan wasn't just visiting Australia. She was stepping into a global role, one she had crafted herself. By the end of the second wave of backlash, one thing was certain: this trip wasn't just a trip anymore. It was symbolic, it was provocative, it was powerful, it was strategic. And depending on who you asked, it was either Meghan Markle's boldest move or her most controversial one yet. And then came the third wave of the story, the moment everything turned personal, political, and far more explosive than anyone expected. It started with a letter innocent on the surface, polite in tone, warm in presentation, yet powerful enough to ignite an entirely new firestorm around Meghan Markle. A letter that should have been simple, routine, and forgettable. But this is Meghan Markle, and in her world, even the quietest gestures ripple like earthquakes. Even the smallest movements become headlines. And this time, those headlines carried a word the world hadn't heard in a long while: royal. Not official, not confirmed, not sanctioned, something far more dangerous. something in between. A quasi-royal trip. For months, Meghan had been navigating Hollywood, building her lifestyle brand, making carefully staged appearances, and reintroducing herself as a public figure separate from the institution she once belonged to. But then came this letter, sent to an Australian astrologer hinting at a possible visit. And the wording, the tone, the implications, they didn't sound like a celebrity asking for arrangements. They sounded like someone orchestrating a tour, someone expecting protocol, someone acting royal but without being royal. And that's where the world stopped. Who asked her to visit? What was the purpose? Why would an astrologer be contacted? And most importantly, why did the letter read like palace correspondence rather than a celebrity request? It didn't take long before Australian media picked it up. Then British tabloids swarmed. Then American outlets joined. Each headline grew more dramatic than the last. Meghan planning royal-style visit, Duchess prepares quasi-royal tour, Australia braces for Markle return. But what made it explosive wasn't the trip itself, it was the timing. Back in the UK, the royal family was already dealing with tension, recovery, and an uneasy public mood. Prince William was balancing pressures. King Charles was navigating a delicate period. Catherine, Princess of Wales, was keeping a low and dignified presence. The monarchy was stretched thin, and suddenly, halfway across the globe, Meghan Markle was preparing a visit that looked, sounded, and moved like an official royal tour. Except it wasn't. And that's where the backlash began, not from royals, not from palace insiders, but from the public. Ordinary people, especially in Australia, felt something was off. Why was Meghan sending letters that looked like state correspondence? Why was she planning meetings, visits, and appearances with the tone of someone representing an institution she divorced herself from? And why now? People remembered 2018, when Meghan and Harry visited Australia as working royals. Crowds filled streets, cameras followed their every move. Meghan was adored. She was pregnant with Archie at the time, glowing, charismatic, and captivating. That tour was the moment many Australians fell in love with her. It was also the moment the royal family realized how powerful and magnetic she could be. And now, years later, after the Oprah interview, after the documentaries, after the memoir, after the fallout, was she trying to recreate that magic? But this time, she wasn't a senior royal. She wasn't representing the crown. She wasn't acting on behalf of the palace. She was just Meghan. And yet, the tone of the trip suggested otherwise. The astrologer who received the letter confirmed it. It felt official. The wording was regal. It carried an aura of formality, seriousness, and hierarchy. Meghan wasn't asking for an appointment, she was announcing a visit. She wasn't requesting a meeting, she was informing of her availability. People began to ask, was this a rebrand? Was Meghan returning to her most powerful version of herself, the Duchess, not the actress, not the podcaster, not the lifestyle guru, but the royal she still legally was, even if she had stepped down? And with those questions came backlash. Critics exploded online, accusing her of playing royal, cosplaying royalty, stealing royal symbolism, confusing the public, and undermining the monarchy. Royal watchers called it provocative. Some Australians called it strange. British commentators went further, labeling it deliberately ambiguous. They argued that Meghan knew exactly what she was doing, that she understood the optics, that she recognized how dangerous it was to blur the line between royal duty and celebrity branding. And then someone pointed out the most uncomfortable truth of all. Meghan Markle, even after leaving the royal family, still holds global influence that dwarfs most official figures. A Meghan visit pulls bigger crowds than a politician. A Meghan interview outranks government announcements. A Meghan appearance commands cameras, commentary, and cultural attention. And that power, when packaged with the style of an unofficial royal tour, threatens to overshadow the very institution she left behind. It didn't help that Harry seemed uninvolved. Reports said he had no role in arranging the potential trip. No comments, no statements, no clarification. It appeared Meghan was doing this independently, her own initiative, her own staff, her own correspondence. And that independence only amplified the controversy. Was this Meghan's attempt to craft her own monarchy? A personal brand of royalty unattached to Buckingham Palace? rooted in celebrity, activism, and self-curation? Or was it something simpler, an attempt to reconnect with the audience that once adored her? Whatever the intention, the optics were chaotic. Australian commentators began asking if they were expected to treat her with royal protocol. Should there be security? Should officials greet her? Should events be organized like a royal tour? Or should she be handled as a private celebrity traveling abroad? The confusion fueled more backlash. The public hates mixed messages, and this one was the ultimate contradiction. A woman who left the royal institution, now behaving in its shadow. And then came the debate that pushed the story over the edge. People began comparing Meghan's expected reception to Kate Middleton's potential future visit. Commentators asked whether Meghan was trying to get ahead of Catherine's return to public life, whether she was stepping into a spotlight that wasn't hers, whether she was trying to outrank the royals by performing royal gestures without royal restrictions. This wasn't just a trip anymore. It was a statement, intentional or not. And people noticed something else too, the astrologer connection. Meghan could have contacted a media house, a charity, a government office, a cultural ambassador. But she contacted a figure associated with predictions, stars, spiritual alignment, and personal branding. It added a layer of mystique and controversy. Was Meghan seeking cosmic validation for a comeback? Was the visit part of a manifestation era for her? Or was she subtly aligning herself with personalities who shape public narratives in unconventional ways? The royal family stayed silent, completely silent. Not a word, not a hint, not a whisper. But that silence was not a dismissal, it was caution. Because the monarchy knows this. Meghan's influence equals unpredictability, and unpredictability equals risk. As the story escalated, Meghan's supporters defended her fiercely. They argued she had every right to travel, every right to meet anyone she pleased, every right to use her title, Duchess of Sussex, because she never lost it. They insisted she wasn't acting royal, she was simply being herself, polished, poised, articulate, and respected. But her critics saw it differently. They believed she was testing boundaries, seeing how far she could go, seeing whether she could play the role of a global duchess without royal duties, responsibilities, or oversight. And that tension between who she was, who she is, and who she might be becoming is what turned a simple letter into an international controversy. By the end of the first wave of backlash, one thing had become clear. This wasn't just about Australia. It wasn't even about a visit. It was about identity, about power, about the blurred lines between monarchy and celebrity, about a woman who knows how to command attention, and about a world still trying and failing to decide where Meghan Markle truly belongs. And as more details began to emerge about what this quasi-royal trip would actually include, things only got more complicated and far more explosive. The third wave of backlash didn't come from commentators, tabloids, or anonymous insiders. It came from the public itself, ordinary Australians, people who remembered 2018 like it was yesterday, people who greeted her with warmth, excitement, admiration, people who felt empowered when she spoke, people who once believed she was a symbol of a modern, inclusive monarchy. And they felt betrayed. Not all of them, but enough to ignite a national conversation. It began when local communities, those who once adored her, started expressing frustration, not because Meghan was visiting, but because they feared the chaos that could follow. Because a quasi-royal visit is not a simple celebrity trip. It attracts crowds, traffic, media, and political attention. It disrupts schedules, it demands preparation, it has consequences. One Australian commentator summarized the public sentiment in a single sentence. If she wants to come, she should come as Meghan, not as a duchess without duties. That line spread everywhere. On Twitter, on TV, on radio, and the sentiment behind it grew louder. Because as more details surfaced, people realized something important. Meghan's trip was carefully curated, almost theatrically curated to mirror the structure of a royal event, but without the accountability of one. So when people began noticing the layers, the mood shifted. Some called her bold, some called her brilliant, but others accused her of deliberately manipulating the symbolism of royalty while rejecting the responsibility that comes with it. The word quasi-royal wasn't chosen by accident. It was chosen because it described the exact gray area. Meghan had stepped into an identity that was neither fully royal nor fully ordinary. And with that identity came confusion. Politicians in Australia began receiving calls asking how the visit should be handled. Should she be afforded security? Should officials greet her? Should airports adjust protocols? Should communities prepare for crowd control? Or should everything proceed as if she were simply a private individual? The government stayed silent publicly, at least, but insiders said they were discussing it behind closed doors. Because the last thing Australia wanted was an embarrassing diplomatic moment where Meghan was treated like a royal without royal authorization. Meanwhile, British commentators added fuel to the fire. They accused Meghan of undermining the monarchy through ambiguity by presenting herself as if she were still part of the institution while claiming independence from it. One commentator went as far as saying, "It's a soft royal tour without a crown." Another claimed, "She's testing the waters, seeing how far she can go without palace approval." And yet another said, if Meghan can conduct a royal-style visit without the monarchy, she becomes a rival to it. A rival. That word changed everything. It reframed the entire scandal. Suddenly, commentators weren't just questioning Meghan's intentions, they were questioning her influence. Because whether you love her or despise her, one thing is undeniable. Meghan attracts attention. Her presence generates headlines. Her movements shape narratives. Her decisions affect audiences across continents. If she traveled like a royal, inspired like a royal, gathered crowds like a royal, but was not a royal representative, what did that make her? And that's when the backlash turned personal. Australian royal fans began posting videos, criticizing the idea of Meghan being treated like royalty after stepping down. Some felt disrespected, others felt confused. Some saw it as attention-seeking. Others saw it as a misguided attempt to reclaim a past she had walked away from. But supporters pushed back forcefully. They argued the backlash was rooted in jealousy, media manipulation, and ongoing hostility toward Meghan. They pointed out she still legally holds the title Duchess of Sussex. They reminded critics that she has every right to travel, to meet people, to speak, to engage. And they asked the most important question of all. If Australians loved her during the 2018 tour, why can't they welcome her now? That question sparked a deeper conversation, one about identity and loyalty, about duty and independence, about the difference between public service and public influence. Meanwhile, the royal family's silence became the biggest unspoken message of all. Their refusal to comment was interpreted in two ways. Either they didn't care, or they cared far more than they wanted the world to know. Because if Meghan pulled off a successful visit, crowds, media attention, community engagement, it would reinforce the idea that she didn't need the institution to function at a royal level. And that idea terrified some royal traditionalists. Then came the moment everything reached its peak. A video surfaced of the astrologer who received Meghan's initial letter. In the clip, he smiled warmly, spoke positively, and praised Meghan's energy. He mentioned the letter had a very special tone, that it was beautifully written, that it felt significant. He didn't criticize her, he didn't accuse her. He simply described the letter the way anyone would describe something elegant and thoughtful. But the internet pounced on his tone, because that tone, respectful, amazed, almost reverent, made it clear that Meghan wasn't being treated like a normal visitor. She was being treated like a duchess, even without palace authorization, even without official duties, even without the crown behind her. And that's when backlash turned into cultural debate. People began arguing about sovereignty, modern monarchy, celebrity influence, and Meghan's evolving role in global society. Was she a duchess reclaiming her narrative? A celebrity using royal aesthetics? A humanitarian seeking meaningful engagement? A woman trapped between two identities? Or a disruptor redefining what royal influence looks like in the 21st century? The argument spiraled, channels debated, TikTok creators dissected the letter, podcasters analyzed her strategy, newspapers published op-eds questioning her intentions. The quasi-royal label became a brand in itself, something the public couldn't stop discussing because it spoke to something larger, something cultural, something symbolic, the collision between tradition and independence, royal duty versus personal freedom, legacy versus reinvention. And Meghan Markle was at the center of that collision. By now, the Australian public was split. Some wanted her to visit. They admired her. They saw the 2018 tour as a historic moment of connection. They believed Meghan could bring positive attention, tourism, and international interest. Others rejected the idea entirely. They didn't want their country to be dragged into royal drama. They didn't want confusion or spectacle. They didn't want Meghan turning a private trip into a royal show. But whether people loved her or hated her, one thing was undeniable. The world was talking about her again. The same Meghan Markle who could vanish for months and still dominate a news cycle the moment she resurfaced. The same Meghan whose smallest actions create global ripple effects. The same Meghan whose identity continues to evolve in ways that fascinate, frustrate, and captivate millions. And that's when the final question emerged, one that no one could ignore. Was this quasi-royal trip Meghan's soft launch for a new global role? Not a Hollywood role. Not a royal one. Something in between. A role built on her title, her influence, her personality, and her independence. A role the monarchy cannot control. A role the public cannot predict. A role only Meghan Markle can define. As the scandal reached its final crescendo, one truth became clearer than ever. Meghan may have left the royal family, but she never left the global stage. And whether Australia welcomes her or pushes back, whether the monarchy reacts or stays silent, whether critics attack or supporters defend, this quasi-royal trip proves something the world had forgotten. Meghan Markle is still one of the most unpredictable, magnetic, and influential public figures alive. And this was only the beginning of whatever she is becoming next.